Support for Central Valley Daily comes from Petunia's Place, celebrating Independent Bookstore Day Saturday, April 26 with a special story time at 11 a.m. Drawings, giveaways, and book signings at 1 p.m. featuring authors Christina Lynch, Janine Raymond, Francesca Parisi, and Jessica Kulekshian. Details at petuniasbooks.com. And from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. It's Wednesday, April 23rd. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. The city of Bakersfield is considering raising the price of some of its public utilities.
We've actually been behind in having rates that are going to be sufficient not only to just keep up operations that are current, but also allow us to replace very aging infrastructure.
We'll hear by how much when we talk with the Bakersfield city manager in just a moment. But first, these news headlines. Central Valley farmers are bracing for the impact of a trade war that could severely hamper agricultural exports. Tricia Stever-Blattler leads the Tulare County Farm Bureau. She says most of the fresh fruits and vegetables grown here in the valley can't be easily warehoused.
So even small trade disruptions could lead to, more significant losses. Those perishable crops really can't afford trade delays.
But she says growers largely remain optimistic that President Trump's tariff policies will benefit the ag industry in the long run.
I think there is always cautious optimism that this could lead to, a better outcome for ag, but there probably will be some pain along the way.
The Trump administration says it's now negotiating trade deals with several countries, including China. That's one of the main buyers of some $6 billion of Valley Ag products each year. To honor Earth Day this year, a nonprofit planted sequoia saplings near the Great Lakes. KVPR's Crescencio Rodriguez Delgado reports the saplings are clones of two giants from the Sierra Nevada.
Sequoias are resilient against disease and insects. They also need a lot of space to grow. And one place with extra space is Detroit, Michigan. The saplings planted on the east side of Detroit were donated by the nonprofit Archangel Ancient Tree Archive. The saplings were cloned from two giant sequoias in Alder Creek Grove. That's north of Springville in Tulare County. The original trees are known as Waterfall and Stag. The latter is thought to be the world's fifth largest giant sequoia. The Windy Fire in 2021 destroyed Waterfall but left Stag standing. Hopefully, clones of the two will grow to stand together again, this time over Detroit. The tree nonprofit also plans to plant sequoia groves in Los Angeles, Oakland, and even as far away as London. For KVPR News, I'm Crescencio Rodriguez Delgado.
California's high-speed rail CEO spoke in the Valley on Tuesday. Ian Chowdhury joined a discussion about the rail's future in an event with our news partner Fresno Land. The discussion centered around how the rail will impact the Fresno region, but it also comes as federal funding for the rail project has come under fire from the new Trump administration. Democratic Assemblymember Dr. Joaquin Arambula is holding a town hall to oppose a controversial mining project. Arambula is standing against a proposal by the mining company Cemex to expand a blast mine along the San Joaquin River. He's introduced legislation to try to stop the project. Critics say the blast mine could contaminate nearby water sources, but Cemex says the project is an opportunity for Fresno to produce locally sourced gravel. Arambula's town hall event will take place Thursday night.
Raise a glass with KVPR, Sunday afternoon, May 4th, for KVPR's wine tasting and more, featuring fine wines from California and beyond, local craft beer, delicious food, live music, and a silent auction, all on the amazing grounds of the Lester Estate in Fresno, where Van Ness Extension meets the San Joaquin River. All proceeds benefit KVPR, so purchase your tickets today at kvpr.org/wine.
And now to our main story. You may not always think about wastewater and sewage services, but they're an important utility we all rely on, and we also pay for it. Depending on the town you live in, you might pay a price that fits your budget. But some cities say their current rates don't fit theirs. That's a reality in Bakersfield. Right now, the current sewer rate for a single-family residence is $239 a year. That comes out to roughly $20 a month for a household. Under a new proposal from the city manager, the rate would become $950 a year, a roughly 300% increase. We spoke to Bakersfield City Manager Christian Clegg. Under his proposal, water rates in Bakersfield would also go up by 50%. Clegg says Bakersfield has had historically low rates, and the city council has the final say over any changes. Plus, he says these proposed rates will bring the city more in line with standard pricing. And it's helpful to understand that the city council sets the vision for Bakersfield's residents, but the city manager makes the plan to implement that vision. So we wanted to learn more about the process for raising water and sewer rates. Clegg joined us for a conversation about Bakersfield's situation. He starts our conversation by explaining his reasoning behind the proposal.
Ultimately, I'm making a recommendation to the city council. We have our water resources director and assistant city manager has oversight over the water department that have been working closely with all of the water staff and it's water and wastewater, which is our sewer function. But I'm making that recommendation to the city council, and the water board saw this recommendation, and then ultimately the full city council saw this recommendation. Why raise rates? The reality is that we've actually been behind in having rates that are going to be sufficient, not only to just keep up operations that are current, but also allow us to replace very aging infrastructure. And it would be probably 6, maybe even 7 years until those projects actually are under construction. But if we don't start raising those revenues right now, we're not going to be able to afford to make those improvements. I think one of the challenges, and we understand why the community is seeing a big number and saying, wow, that's a huge increase, it's too much too fast, is that we've been behind now for more than a decade. Our rates have been very low, the lowest of any large city in the valley.
To get specific, I want to say it was a 50% increase to the water usage and 300% to sewer usage. Am I correct?
Over a 5-year period, it's a 50% increase for water. It's about $10 increase a month for the average customer for water. We're not as far behind in water. Water is really based on a couple of changes in state regulations and changes in contaminants that we have to address in the water system. And we've been keeping better with water. And so those are more incremental of increases. But yes, a 300% increase on the sewer side in 1 year, we know is a very big pill to swallow. And so we put that out as the max possibility. At this point, my sense is that we're going to identify another option that's somewhere in between where we are today and what that maximum could possibly be.
So the sewage would not be staggered, but the water would be over 5 years.
Yes.
Okay.
As it's proposed, it is staggered, the water. And right now, the sewage was, as originally proposed, was not proposed to be staggered. But we did present a couple options to the water board initially, and council saw those in our conversation when they approved the notice going out, that there are a couple of options that do have a staggered approach.
You mentioned the $950 annual rate for sewer usage. Currently, it's around $239. What do you say to the critique that these ratepayers are having to compensate for the city's lack of financial stewardship, like that they're unfairly bearing this burden in such a dramatic increase? I could see people wanting to point the finger back at the city and say, hey, why are we having to do this in such a dramatic way? Shouldn't you have been more focused on this years prior?
Yeah, a couple different thoughts there. I respect and appreciate the critique because I can understand why someone would say, wow, like that's just too much, too fast. Why didn't we see this coming sooner? Or is there some other way to pay for this? I'll take that last one first, is that we don't treat this quite the same like police services or fire services or park services. This doesn't come out of the general fund. These are rates that are charged to customers who receive, sewage services in exchange for that rate. And so there's not really another way that we can pay for this. It has to come from the rates. And so there hasn't been, a mismanagement of overall, general stewardship resources. We've had what's come for the rates, from the rates, for the ratepayers. So then that comes to the other question, is why have we not anticipated or foreseen that we need to increase rates maybe more modestly over time? There's two different aspects to that. First, the nature of how we are treating sewage has actually changed fairly significantly in the last 10 years. We've seen a lot more water conservation, and as there's less water in our overall system, it's more challenging to treat some of that sewage. Also, we've seen just overall inflationary costs. We all are experiencing this, unfortunately. We see it in our personal, finance budgets, but we also see it in business, that the inflation of the cost of doing business has gone up significantly since the pandemic in ways that 10 years ago would have been hard to anticipate. And so there are factors that have changed and shifted, unfortunately, in the last 5 to 7 years, that costs are just much greater. But I would also argue the third point is that I think City of Bakersfield historically felt strongly about trying to hold its rates as low as possible. And I understand that. And I think that there's merit in not wanting to unnecessarily raise rates. But our treatment plant number 2 is 70 years old. And typically a treatment plant has a useful life of about 30 years before you need to make some pretty major upgrades. And so over a 10 or 20 year period, it is important to have a 20-year capital improvement forecast that tells you what your costs are probably going to be to keep that system up over a longer time frame. And because we haven't significantly increased our rates in a 20-year period, that it means we've fallen behind on saving up against some of those large capital improvements. And so I can only say that while it probably felt good to be able to say we have some of the lowest rates out there, we probably should have been incrementally raising our rates more over time to make sure that we didn't find ourselves in a spot now that, some of these inflation and some of these other costs are exacerbating the issue.
Another thing people might be wondering is, how much do you anticipate this revenue to be, and specific projects? You mentioned infrastructure. Any specific projects that this increased revenue the city will receive that it will be used on?
Yeah, great question. So we have, as I mentioned, and we have 2 treatment plants, and I apologize to the public who might say, because we call them Plant 2 and Plant 3, there is no Plant 1. We didn't rename them once Plant 1 was taken offline. So we have 2 plants. Plant 3 is actually going to be due for its 20-year preventative maintenance within the next 5 to 10 years. And so we're trying to generate enough rates that would help make sure we keep up with the needs at Plant 3. Plant 2, as I mentioned, is well beyond its useful life. And so we're going to need essentially an entire rebuild of Plant 2. There are increases to the operating and maintenance costs of our sewage system, but we could actually get by with those with much more modest increases. But to make it possible for us to rebuild Plant 2 and be prepared for enhancements to Plant 3, that's the bigger driver of these rate increases.
That was my conversation with Bakersfield's city manager, Christian Clegg. The public hearing to discuss the proposed increases in sewage and water rates is scheduled for May 28th. And that's today's show. If you have a related story idea, or there are changes in your community you think the Central Valley Daily team should know about, you can reach out to us. Email podcast@kvpr.org. Today's episode was produced by Jonathan Linden and KVPR with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. Find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.
This is Tanya Mosley, co-host of Fresh Air. You'll see your favorite actors, directors, and comedians on late-night TV shows or YouTube. But what you get with Fresh Air is a deep dive. Spend some quality time with people like Billie Eilish, Questlove, Ariana Grande, Stephen Colbert, and so many more. We ask questions you won't hear asked anywhere else. Listen to the Fresh Air podcast from NPR and WHYY.